Hello, star people and awakened souls. Thank you so much for joining me again for Ascend the Matrix podcast. I'm your host, Chrys King. I'm a shamanic healer, ascended astrologer, and I help mystics, light workers, star seeds tap out of the matrix by starting businesses and creating financial freedom for themselves. So, I have a very special guest on today who is a friend of mine and a soul brother, and we've had him on the podcast before. Alandra, I want you to introduce yourself, let us know what you do, what your work is, and then we're going to dive deep. But before we get there, I just want to let people know this conversation is a part two to an episode that was released several months ago. So go back and find the episode with Alandra that we previously did on this podcast because there's so much of what we're going to talk about here that will call back to that, and you may feel like your wheels are spinning and your head will even be spinning by how multidimensional and how strange it might get. So make sure you give yourself some context, or excuse me, some context and some background by going back and watching that episode. But Alondra, let us know who you are, the work you do, and how you got to this point. Let's give a little background again, and then we'll dive deep into the next part of this amazing conversation.
Yes. Hello, happy to be here. I am Alandra Markman. I am a coach working to help people with spiritual development and to help people recover from trauma-based mind control. So that includes a bunch of things. I teach meditation. I help people work with memories of satanic ritual abuse. I help people recall soul fragments from different timelines from secret space program abuse. So it's a lot of different things. Um, yeah, and I just try to go at the pace of the client and at the pace of the earth, and everything can unfold in its natural time. So I have a very gentle approach in general to all these kinds of things. I'm also a survivor of these kinds of things. That's how this all was born and why I'm drawn to work with it now. My soul contract is very elaborate and it's very specific that I'm in service for these sorts of concerns. And of course, I had to experience them to understand them. So that's the very short version
Yeah.
of myself. Hello. Yeah, and I have other things in life that I care about. I'm a poet, I'm a musician, I'm a gamer, I'm a hiker, I do all sorts of stuff. But yeah, that's sort of the main thing. Yeah, the healing and the coaching.
Yeah, yeah. So thank you for being of service and thank you for being here again today and for being so brave because people listening, um, a lot of this is new to them. Not necessarily ascending the matrix and spirituality and healing work, but trauma-based mind control. You have spiritual people everywhere who still don't know that this is going on or they're refusing it. They're spiritually bypassing it. And
Yeah.
I did it back in the day. I remember saying, "Oh, the reptilian thing, that's not for me. That's David Icke and his whatever he's got going on over there, or the Illuminati, that's not for me. That's not going to be in my experience. I'm just going to do an Abraham Hicks and not give my attention to it." And then I had shapeshifters shapeshifting in front of me, and then I realized that I've had some of this go on in my family line and in my life and in my own healing process so viscerally that I tried to hide from the world and try to push down into the darkness that I couldn't refuse it. So, and then I remember I watched you on a podcast last year. And when I said to myself, I need to look into this. And this is when Kathy O'Brien came into my sphere much more strongly than ever before. And I had gotten a book and watched more podcasts and a documentary. And really, there's another person that I can't remember her name, but I had to face it. I had to know what was going on because we as spiritual people need to understand there are programs, literally technological programs and frequencies being emitted to mind control people. And so we're also pointing the blame and getting angry at so many people on the planet who are doing things because they're mind controlled. And a lot of the mind control frequencies live in our advertisements. They're on the internet, they're in the TV, they're in songs, they're in pop and hip hop songs. And so there's this new layer of distortion and illusions that cleared that I had to see in my process that I didn't want to see. And then when you came into the sphere, it was like, wow, I don't want to see these things. I'm sure he doesn't want to see these things, but he lived through it. So I want you to share before we go deeper into mind control and your experience with that. And I'm just going to let the audience know it may get confusing when we start talking about this life that you're currently in and another life that you had in Montauk um, back in the 1970s. Is that correct?
Yes, that's
And
correct.
so that can confuse people. So I want you to give a little bit of background around that before we go further. And also, just in case people are not already familiar with the first episode or your other podcasts and programs you've been on, just give us a little bit of your background around your birth, um, how you got to 17 years old and got out of that, and take us from there. Just give us some background.
Sure. Well, I am representing more than one person's experience in my current body, speech, and mind. So it is complex. I'm representing more than one timeline. So I have overlapping experiences for some of the same dates and times. Even right now, I'm experiencing simultaneously other versions of this moment, which happens to be Friday the 13th
I
of
know. Yeah.
2025. Um, even now, I am aware of other timeline experiences where this date has a very different meaning for me. So it continues now. It's not necessarily over. Um,
Explain a
yeah,
little bit about that. And that's why I brought that up before we got on the call, that it was Friday the 13th.
yeah,
So just take us into that. Because there's going to be a lot of people listening. They are not familiar with with 33 and 13 and Satanism. Even 10 years ago, if you had said Satanism to me, that was something that the Bible thumpers were talking about in the South.
yeah,
It wasn't this Illuminati global elite UN reptilian program to me. It was something I would have shut off because it was so Christian and not for me.
yeah. Well, the number 13 is, as I experience it, a very sacred number. It's the number of dimensions before
Yeah.
the next octave of experience. It's the number of chakras if you're using a more fine chakra system. I mean, the seven system or the 13 system.
Yeah.
It's a very charged number. It's the doorway to higher realities. It has all these mystical associations for a good reason. And it's
Metatron's
precious.
cube with the 13 spheres and Metatron's cube. Like
Mhm.
13 has always been my favorite number and
Yeah, mine
7,
too.
both of them.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so and that was a big thing as a kid. And even when I started making music, all the albums had 7 songs or 13 songs, and it
Mm,
all had this mystical reason for it. But
mm.
also, I would always ask, why is there no 13th floor? And then when I got into the world of Satanism and mind control and MK Ultra and Illuminati, and it was like 13, they obviously like that number too.
They do. Yeah. All the tuned in groups like it. The
Yeah.
positive tuned in groups, the negative tuned in groups. Yeah. Yeah. But it is a very special number in a satanic religious context. And a lot of their major holidays um, have the number 13 worked into them. Their rituals have the number 13 worked into them. It is a day for all sorts of witchcraft. Like that's not just a Christian superstition, it's also a real thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you
Um,
feel that they use that number because and we've talked about this before, but I want people to hear this, that because it's so sacred and it is sort of a matrix unlocking code, if they stand in front of the doorway out of the matrix and guard it, they sort of usurp the frequency or think they are.
Absolutely. That is truth. Yes. They love to stand exactly where we're going and try to block the
Yeah.
way in so many ways. While we're on the subject, the number 666 is extremely sacred.
Yes.
They're gatekeeping that number with their fear peddling. So,
Oh, I'm
yeah.
so glad that you said that because a lot of my pricing, when I sit down to do pricing for my website, and like my 6 month mentorship program comes out to six, and there was a 666 code in it, and I had a visceral reaction to it. Like, why is that? And I'm not Christian, and it wasn't until I got into all of this that I was like, wait, hold on. I'm not. that's when 666 started to bother me truly. And then Spirit was like, no, you're going to take that back. And so I chose to take it back in that moment. But
Mm.
I sort of needed to hear what you were saying right now, because even
Wow.
spiritual people will say carbon based matter is six protons, six neutrons, six electrons. And there's nothing wrong with carbon based matter. It may be the realm that they can operate the best in that density, but it
Mm.
doesn't belong to them.
Mm. True. Huh. Well, there were several questions earlier that I was just starting to answer, and then we talked about numbers, which is fine.
So I was wanting you to just take us back a little bit into your childhood, into the experience with the cult,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
to 17 years old, and then the
Yeah.
walk in, just to
Right
give
on.
people a little bit of foundation.
Yeah, yeah, some orientation. So I was initially born in September of 1970 into my first body. I was called Max at the time. And that person, me, or it can be considered a separate person, but it's part of my consciousness now, so I experience it as myself. Max was brought to Montauk, Long Island from Patchogue, where he was born, which is further west on Long Island, and went through what is popularly called the Montauk Project. Actual name is Project Rainbow Bridge, or some versions of it were called Project Phoenix. This was an Air Force intelligence and CIA program in collaboration with a number of private groups and off-world groups like the Draconian ETs, Bell Labs, IBM. There were a couple, private corporate interests involved. Anyway, it was a whole production on this Cold War military base. It was a radar base that was supposed to be for deflecting Soviet aggression, and it was turned into a mind control facility and used that way for many, many decades, um, particularly from the 60s up until the late 80s. So when I arrived there in my original body in 1974, it was right in the thick of it. It was buzzing with activity. This would be the first or more like second generation Montauk boys, as they're usually called. So there's a lot of like lingo about this, so I'll try to slow down and explain everything. Most of the people brought to the base were young boys. There were also girls, there were also adults, so this is not unique to boys. Um, but I was one of the many Montauk boys. I was brought there at 4 years old, subjected to all kinds of unimaginable torture, and used as a vessel, as a conduit to interface with the technology on the base to open up portals to other dimensions and other times and places. So they needed psychic kids. Um,
That was what I was going to ask next.
yeah, to
Was it wasn't just children or just anyone, it was you, Max, as having some type of ability, kind of like these special programs they had in the 90s and early 2000s
mhm.
for students. So I just wanted to be clear that there was a reason that they were using that. It wasn't just technology, it was government and the global elite trying to tap into the psychic nature of human for their advantage.
Indeed.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, this technology, a lot of it was reverse engineered from Zeta Reticulan technology. Those are the little gray
Right.
aliens. So this is a psionic technology. It's a mind and matter interface where you think something into being, it comes into being. It sort of exaggerates the manifestation process, makes it more like an immediate results kind of
Yes.
thing. I
But
mean,
it's
we
artificially induced.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Artificial version. Of course, we experience the organic version as spiritual practitioners all the time.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, but this is an artificial version. So yeah, there were only a few kids who could fully go in there and open the portals and operate this technology. I happened to be one of them, and also one of the ones who survived. A lot of the kids died. The torture was extremely brutal. The neglect was extremely brutal. So I witnessed many groups of kids, mostly boys, but also girls, coming in and pretty much all of them dying except for me. And then the process would repeat week after week, month after month, year after year, for whatever combination of reasons. I was one of the ones that survived and kept operating the chair. A lot of people talk about the Montauk chair.
The chair. Yeah.
Yeah, so that was kind of command central for opening the portals and sending people on different missions throughout space, time, and dimension. So I'd be one of the people operating that machine and laying in that chair.
Yeah.
Uh, so that was a whole experience, and I was there for years. Um, I eventually escaped when some of the more positive Zeta reticulans faked my death and helped me escape that whole situation. But by then I was in my 20s. But little did I know that I would be coming right back. So that's the consciousness transfer part. So fast forward a bit to 1986. That's when this body was born. Hi, I'm Alandra. This body was born in 1986 in New York City.
Yeah.
And we're technically at a breeding facility and then moved to New York City. But I grew up in New York. So at that time, um, this person, me, Alandra, I was born into a satanic ritual abuse oriented family, a satanic Luciferian family with roots in the cult going back many generations. Um, so then in this body, I went through a much more religious type of experience, a black magic experience. I mean, that was at Montauk as well, but the veneer on the Montauk Project was much more scientific and military. But what I was born into was, really more ancient, the satanic cult experience.
Yeah.
So I went through all sorts of extremely nasty rituals in this body as well. Um, and Max and I was born as Alan, so Max and Alan had separate experiences to some extent, but we were merged at the age of 2.5 when this body was 2.5, 1989. Max came into this body, and not by death and reincarnation, but by an artificial process, often called
Consciousness.
consciousness transfer. Yeah,
So now that you are here, I love that people have context for this because, when we refer to Max, I just want people to know who we're talking about, that
yeah,
Alondra, as we've talked about before, is a sort of representation of both of you together as a coexisting organism. That you
mm,
are you, but the you that is you is a little bit more complex than how people see themselves as an I or a you, and we're just giving that a name and
yeah,
honoring all pieces of that. And it's
yeah,
interesting that there has to be a reason that they would consciousness transfer someone out of an experience like that into another experience that was just as horrific in certain ways, if I may say that way, or if not worse in certain ways, because of how
yeah,
young it started and how familial it was, and
yeah,
the sort of plan that the Illuminati Satanic cult had for you. Uh,
yeah,
being a breeder and that sort of thing. And people can
yeah,
refer back to other episodes in the previous episode for more information around that. But it's, I obviously we can feel that there was a plan to dismantle this and dissolve this by bringing two uh, consciousnesses together that both had a similar mission in dismantling it. Yeah?
yeah, indeed. Yeah. Yeah, that's the larger plan. It's very intricately orchestrated by both the positive and negative forces. It's quite a dance. It's very delicate.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, but we're here now today, and as you were referencing, as I might have already shared in part one, yeah, I was used by the Satanic cult as a breeder to make more kids for the Satanists to use. Often those kids would not get birth certificates. They'd be adopted out to different families, a lot of extra legal activities going on with the kids that I was forced to conceive. And then also, I was being raised to be a handler myself and to be a programmer myself. So by the time I was an older child, I was able to get inside people's heads and break them down pretty badly from the inside and manipulate them
Yeah.
on very deep levels using telepathic control. And of course, using the more standard shame and guilt and fear that all control relies on,
Yeah.
intimidation. Um, and that's a big part of the training that I draw on in my work as a coach today. I'm trained to break people down. So basically, now I'm doing the opposite, helping them rise up, helping them come together. But I use that knowledge every day, the
Yeah.
knowledge from being a programmer.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's what we do as alchemists is we use the darkness always serves the light, but now we're doing it with intention. You know,
Mhm.
teach us how to manipulate reality for Saturn, and we'll manipulate reality for the all
Mm.
once we are fully embodied in our awakening and our ascension process. So, uh,
Yeah,
you know, the work that you do today really centers around helping uh, ritual abuse survivors and
Mhm.
mind control survivors. So you've not only had this experience at Montauk where it was being done for a specific reason for government and black ops military reasons and you know inter what it looks like to me right now is interplanetary communication as well and
Yeah,
trying to bring other timelines from other places. It's like messing with timelines.
it is
And
very much messing with timelines. Yes.
it's very like, who do you all think you are? I mean, talk about like in a movie when they're like, if you had made one mistake, you could have ripped a hole in time and space and everything would have, it's like they were
Yeah.
messing with something really um, extreme, which is why it was so secret. And
Hmm.
so that's why I marvel at your bravery for coming out and bringing this to the world and helping because when we get into the mind control conversation, it gets really tricky because people listening will be like, "Whoo, I'm so glad I didn't experience that." When actually all of us have some level of mind control that we're dealing with, whether it's 5G or it was the television in the 80s and the programming coming at you from media. There are many different ways that mind control can show up. But when I've listened to Kathy O'Brien on the Roseanne podcast and listened to you and read books and really delved deep into MK Ultra and mind control techniques like that, like monarch programming, I'm like, this is not just your typical convincing someone to buy something or trying to get people to be zombified. It's much more insidious and much more intelligent. So I want you to take us into the world of mind control from your perspective as it was being done to you and how it was done through trauma and why
Yeah,
it's done through trauma, but also how it shows up.
indeed. Well, first off, since you referenced Kathy O'Brien, I would like to say her experience that is presidential model programming, and it's very, very similar to what my own mother went through. So that it's definitely a good reference point,
Yeah,
Kathy O'Brien's book.
yeah,
My mother even went through the same school in Youngstown, Ohio that Kathy O'Brien went through. Their training was extremely similar. So it really helped me empathize with my mother more reading her book. It's like, oh, well, this is if my mother, had ever gotten free and was able to write a book, it would
yeah.
probably be a lot like this.
Yeah, I mean, because for you as her child, I can only imagine what you have experienced having empathy for her, but also like honoring the inner child that now realizes what was happening to him
Hmm.
and just
Hmm.
the anger and the rage and also the love for your mother as a child, as a human organism, and just how complex that must be and how complex that must be for all ritual survivors out there whose parents willingly did this. And it's like, but did they willingly? I just did a podcast episode where we were talking about free will and the ritual abuse and how much of it is free will if you're being mind controlled and it's an alter that's doing that. It's not even the real you that would have been there had you just been raised on a farm with no trauma around animals. Do you know what I mean? I'm wanting people to really get into this conversation because people are pointing fingers at Diddy and Beyonce and Rihanna and all these celebrities and even I have done it where I've had to realize what if they're mind controlled? Like what, not what if they are. So what
Still
part of
worth,
them do I blame?
yeah.
Is it the part of them that's possessed by some type of archontic force or mind controlled to find pain as pleasure? Like it's so insidious that it you don't know where it's actually coming from. It's like the archons, the reptilians, they're hiding behind all these smoke and mirrors. I woke up this morning hearing smoke and mirrors, smoke and mirrors, smoke and mirrors. And
Mhm.
that's what I feel the mind control is doing is creating so many layers of distortion that you as a survivor had to unravel that within yourself to even find out who Alondra are or is, you know?
Yeah. This
Gosh,
is
it's just so complex. I want you to take us into that.
yeah, right. So going back to trauma-based mind control. So it those are the best words that I'm aware of. There are other terms like organized abuse, extreme abuse, or ritual abuse and mind control, RAMCOA, SRA, Satanic Ritual Abuse. These are all sort of related. I like trauma-based mind control because for me, the words are accurate. It covers all the bases. The foundation of this system is fragmenting a person and intentionally creating a mental disorder, dissociative identity disorder, or what we used to call multiple personality disorder. So that's basically the bedrock in most cases of mind control training. It usually starts very young. It can start before birth in the womb. I mean, it can start very early. In my case, there were elaborate rituals going on even to facilitate my conception. It went back that far, into my soul stream. And there was even contact, like metaphysical contact. But generally speaking, it starts in the womb. Usually the mother is tortured, and different chemicals and electric shocks are administered even to a fetus in the womb. So this is very early. Anything to violate a person's foundational sense of safety, foundational sense of being and boundaries really helps the controllers because the less sense of self a person has, the more they can be ordered to do things that are actually against their will.
Mm,
So that was definitely true in my case. I was being tortured in the womb. I was being tortured as a newborn. Even, yeah, in the cradle, going through extreme sexual assault, physical torture, physical neglect, basically just to shatter any developing sense of self that might be coming into being. And the baby and later the toddler is basically taught there is no comfort in life. Life is only discomfort. Life is only suffering. You can't rely on anyone. You can't trust anything. These very foundational distrust programs are the
yeah.
goal of early programming. And then as soon as the child has any sense of self, and this is usually before the formation of conscious memory, so we're talking very, very young, like not even a year old sometimes. Um, Very complex and diabolical exercises are done to alienate the child from itself to make it dissociate. So, dissociation is when your mind and body separate. That's the basic definition. And there are many versions of it along a big spectrum. Dissociation is a normal part of life. So, for me, it's not something to demonize in and of itself. But extreme states of dissociation are how the cult split people into different personalities. This is usually done with overwhelming physical or sexual trauma, or sometimes physical neglect, like I've been describing. So, yeah, there's a pretty good description of this that I'm just now reading in Svali's book. Svali speaks, she's a survivor who, like me, was being trained to be a handler and now talks about all this kind of stuff. So it's
How do you
her
spell
her
that?
her account. Svali. Yeah, and she does interviews, I think, so
Hmm.
might be good to have her on.
Yeah.
Um, so in my case, I was basically trained um, to completely reject myself. What I call the host, or a lot of DID systems, so dissociative identity disorders, DID. A lot of DID people refer to the host personality, which is basically who you were before the splits. It's the core personality of the body mind. Um, so my host was split off. It's usually through a very intense shaming experience. So in my case, my core self was split off when I was just a little over 2 years old. And an adult man was murdered using a ceremonial knife. And I was made to feel responsible for this. I had adult handlers basically put the knife in my hand, make me put it into this man, and shame me for that. What have you done? You've killed this man. A very intense humiliation ritual to try to get me to take on that shame. And of course, I wasn't actually responsible for that, but there's no way to know that as a frightened toddler. So in that experience, my host, my core personality was completely alienated. Oh, I'm a murderer. I can't trust myself. Like there's not, I have no ground here within myself. So I would shame the host, or the host was shamed to a place deep inside the psyche where I couldn't access it. And in its place, I was given many other names and personalities that I was supposed to identify with and call my own. Like, well, you don't want to be a murderer, do you? Like, oh no, like, and in that moment, also very core to mind control is this dialectic between punishment and reward. Like when you're in this extremely vulnerable state, then they'll go all soft on you. They'll offer you nice things. They'll offer you a way out. And of course, you're desperate, you're completely ashamed, you're horrified. You're basically going to accept anything that they
Right.
present that gives you a little bit of hope. So it's like, oh, but you didn't do that. Your alter did that. I mean, they don't use the word alter.
Right.
It's it's not
The name
theoretical.
they give it. It's not you.
Yeah.
To
So
start compartmentalizing it and really solidifying these different aspects or personalities,
yeah.
um, these alternate personalities. And what's really, um, I guess, convoluted is the word that's coming to me is you think to yourself, how could someone do that to a child, but yet it was done to them? They're
Hmm.
being mind controlled. These handlers, these breeders, they grew. This is a multi-generational. I mean, this goes back for some people even believe to the time of Babylon. The Babylonian Brotherhood, like this Alpha Draconian or Archontic program that eventually becomes the Illuminati and this really well organized global cult began thousands and thousands and thousands of years ago. So there's
Hmm.
been a lot of experimentation, but just a lot of just understanding how to do it. This is all just part of the choreography. And you were
Yeah.
being trained to become someone who would have done that had 17 years old in that moment and that
Yeah.
time had not happened.
Yeah.
So I'm not trying to give a pass and make people feel badly for them. I'm also just not wanting people to get totally into a state of judgment because that's the world of the Alpha Draconians and the Illuminati and mind control is that they want you pointing fingers in all the wrong places and also being in a state of disgust yourself. It's also traumatizing the public a little bit to even know that this is happening. And they
Mm.
like that if we're not careful. So we want to bring lots of softness and non-duality, non-judgment into this and just really understand we're bringing this to you all listening and watching to be informed, not only so that you know how crazy it is and that the people who are coming out saying these things need a voice and they need you to hear them because like in the Kathy O'Brien documentary, Alandra, when they brought up the reptilians and she said something along the lines of, I think that was just a mind control technique. My little brain didn't know how to handle it, so I saw something shapeshift and it was like a mind control, and that's not actually what happened. Well, that's not going to help people's case when they come out and they say, I saw Jeffrey Epstein turn into a lizard. Well,
Mm.
you're definitely not going to be believed by the public, let alone that you saw something like that or were a part of it at all, or that this is even going on, and that our presidents, our global leaders are a part of this. Because even they're being mind controlled on some level, because we want to blame them, and then there's actually another force at work behind what's controlling them. And so it's really cleverly disguised and well organized. And I
Mhm.
just want people to understand how deep and how complex this whole thing is. And I'm going to let you continue, but I really am curious how you have unraveled this and all these different layers, these different altars that were created within you, how you brought all of that into a cohesive organism, how you healed, because you're obviously helping other people with that now from this place of understanding. But
Yeah.
it's important for people to know how crazy or how complex it is to heal from.
Hmm. Yeah, it's quite convoluted to say the least. Um, the personalities that I was given and forced to identify with, some of them are very ancient. Again, they're working from a very ancient playbook. Some of the names are stock names that are taken from different inspirations from Western culture, from Christian culture, that are then turned on their head. So there's a lot of reverse Christian programming that goes into this process. Um, some of them were biblical names, like Jacob was one of my altars. Jeremy was the first split. These are names which have their own codex of meaning,
Yeah.
which the Satanists are looking to exploit. And they've been doing this for centuries and centuries. And so you have the vibration, the negative vibrations of the name, as well as the positive vibrations. So yeah, some of the names were like that. Some of them were what are called introjects, where you basically take on the personality of one of your handlers. So they, in a sense, create an introject of themselves, and then you have your own internalized version of that handler, and you really come to believe that it's part of yourself or that part of the handler lives inside you.
Yeah.
Sometimes that's actually true. If the handler is psychically gifted enough, they can project some of their soul into you and actually control you telepathically. So sometimes there is actual external control going on, and sometimes it's just an illusion, most often an illusion. In my case, my handlers were very advanced, and so I did have that experience of other people telepathically controlling me from the inside, which is incredibly disempowering to say the
Yeah.
least.
Yeah.
Very confusing. My handlers were very expert. I've since come to understand that my handlers were some of the most professional in the world, and that there was a reason for that because they wanted me to be one of the most professional handlers in the world. So honestly, by the time I was 5 or 6, the core splits were basically complete, and I was functioning essentially as an extremely traumatized adult in a child body. I was thinking like an adult by the time I was 6, maybe even 5. And I was torturing other people and programming other people from that time, including adults. So, I mean, it's absurd to imagine, but as a little 6-year-old kid, they would bring a grown man into the room with me, and I would fuck him up. I would get inside his head and I would break him into pieces internally. So, of course, when you're dealing with psychic skills, the body is less of a limitation. So,
Yeah.
a lot of my work was psychic. Some of it was torture based, obviously. But a master handler uses both sets of skills, both the physical side of things and the spiritual side of things to great extent. And that's what I was being trained to be. So literally from 6, I would have adults brought into me. I would have other children brought into me, and I would do all sorts of things to them. I would telepathically assault them. I would physically or sexually assault them, even before I had any real idea of what sex was, because you don't as a child. But I was torture trained to mime the actions and basically fake having a sex drive,
Yeah.
as disgusting as it is.
Yeah.
Um, and yeah, I was doing this to others. I was torturing infants. I was really given, I saw how the sausage was made. They brought me in there with infants, again, maybe at 6 or 7 or 8 years old, and I would be doing the torturing and the programming on an infant just born.
Yeah.
So I also saw it from the handler side, starting from a very young age. Yeah. And it's incredible the compaction of the mind that happens and how much you can grow up in a very short time. I mean, any child who's been through extreme trauma, obviously becomes adultified to some extent,
Yeah.
right? This is a
Yeah.
normal thing about the human mind. But the cult people really know how to exploit this. So really, by the time I was an older boy, 7, 8, 9, 10, I mean, I already had status as a master handler. Um, and yeah, and that was really brought forth all the way up until I got free around 16 on this timeline from this experience.
And how did that happen?
It was really complex. I told some of the story on Annika Lucas's podcast, but essentially, I made a suicide attempt when I was 14. This is very typical for especially survivors who are more aware of what's happening, to make suicide attempts from a young age.
Do you feel
This,
that you were more aware? I'm sorry to interrupt, but do you
yeah.
feel you were more aware because I don't want to put our souls and our consciousnesses on different pedestals, but do
Mm,
you feel that the mission was just online so much that as you were getting older and coming into your self, whatever that would have looked like in many different ways at that time,
mm,
that there was just this internal knowing that this isn't correct, where other handlers, other kids who grow up and become handlers and breeders, and they just seem to be just their alters. They're just almost completely surrendered to the cult program, where
yes,
something, the light within you, was not going to let that happen. And
yes.
once it became online, or was coming online in a specific way, your human compassion had no other place to go than just, I want to leave.
Mm, mm. I appreciate you bringing that up. Yes, it's true. Very few children have any awareness. Once this sort of programming is done, any real self-awareness is quite often buried, and it's rare to continue to have a sense of conscience at all in any form. So it is quite miraculous that I did. And the wiser ones in the satanic cults look for these kinds of children. They look for these children who are clearly older souls, who have been through the life and death process many times. And there are ways to identify this for anybody who's tuned in, positive or negative. So the sages in the cult did and do especially value older souls, star seed souls, higher vibrational souls. They are on the lookout for these kinds of people, these kinds of children being born, and they look for them by psychic means, they look for them by technological means, all sorts of ways to ferret out these children who have a higher vibration, essentially more soul within them that can be manipulated and used and fragmented.
Ah, I didn't never thought about it that way. It wasn't just that they have these strong abilities or they'll possibly remember, and so we've got to really target them to keep less remembrance from happening or to just know where our possible problem children may be. But
Mm,
there's literally more wattage capacity. There is more light plasma
hmm.
to being embodied that we can siphon.
Yes,
Oh
indeed.
God.
Yeah,
This is so intelligent, and I mean that's not a compliment for them, okay?
yeah.
But it is so intelligent and well done,
Yes.
if
Yeah,
I
it
can
is.
say it that way.
Yeah, they're functioning on a very high level of human ability for sure. Um, so yes, I was one of those starseed children who retained more of a sense of self throughout this whole process. And if they can get a starseed to turn into a handler and serve them voluntarily, that is essentially the ultimate victory for them.
Yeah, yeah. Because we specifically came here to dismantle them and also to help them ascend and transcend as well. It's
Indeed.
like absolutely. So it's not to all of them, because when we talk about Alpha Draconians and Reptilians, there are many different races, and there are Alpha Draconians who are I'm sure they're saying, I know that they are, where they're like, we are done with this. We want to get out of this realm too. Like we're
Mhm.
trapped. I can't, we've
Mhm.
mastered this realm. I'm done with this. I'm sure there are star seeds from the Pleiades and Andromeda incarnating into Alpha Draconian bodies too.
Indeed,
Like, why
yes.
would you just, so I'm
Yeah.
seeing it happen right now. And
Yeah.
that I can see why they would target that.
Yes.
And
Um,
where do because I know you did the air quotes when we talked about star seeds, and it's because people like us don't. We know that everyone's using these terms star seeds, and we're not trying to overuse them and use them just as a blanket term for many things. But you do consider yourself a star seed, yes?
I do
Okay.
sincerely without quote.
Sincerely. And
Yes.
what are your starseed lineages from your experience, not from any BuzzFeed article or BuzzFeed quizzes that you've taken, but
Um,
just share with us a little bit about your starseed lineage that you have remembered or recovered.
if there are starseed quizzes on
There
BuzzFeed, that
are.
makes
You can go find out if you're an Arcturian on BuzzFeed.
that makes me really happy. Regardless, regardless of the degree of accuracy,
I
just
know. It is. It's the time we live in now. Yes.
yeah,
Yeah, it's cool.
just that that's permeating outward into the mass
Yes. And even
consciousness.
if it
That's
is
so awesome.
bullshit, I think sometimes our star seeds, our consciousness leads us to things like that to just open the portal. It did for me back in the day.
Yes,
People would say things to me that, I eventually realized I'm not that, but it also helped me to even consider it. So yeah.
absolutely. So my core star family is Antarian. So they're from the Scorpio constellation. Antares is part of that constellation. It's the heart of the Scorpion. It's a
I
very
know, which I find so interesting that you have from our tropical astrology zodiac, Sun in Scorpio.
hmm
I think that is not necessarily an accident. And
Yeah.
what something that came to me earlier was, do you feel that, I'm just wanting your take on this, because I know the global elite uses tropical astrology, not the actual constellations, but the vernal equinox and the Celtic wheel of the year, and they use lots of Samhain and all these festivals, these things that are based off of the sun. They use it in their own practices. Do you feel that they breed children around astrology? I mean, you want to talk about,
Absolutely.
let me,
Yes.
this is not to demean you in any way or get on you for being Scorpio sun,
Yeah.
but if you really want a handler that is of the highest caliber, you need there to be, you want to talk about getting in someone's mind and breaking them down
Mm.
and manipulating them on a soul psychic level.
Mm.
Scorpio is the sign that is notorious for that. So I didn't bring it up earlier because I didn't want you to think that I was like, that's such a Scorpio thing of you, or no wonder you were good at that. Because I have so much compassion from what you've been through because Scorpio in its higher nature is so empowered by the Holy Spirit and so divinely connected as a human organism where sexuality becomes sacred. There's such a beauty in it,
Mm.
but they can siphon it and use that. You were probably incredibly gifted from a psychic nature just as a child. They were just accessing codes that you had within you and inverting them as they do.
Mm. Yeah, I
Very
appreciate you
interesting.
speaking of that. Yeah, it's true. It's true. My birth was heavily manipulated. I mean, I was conceived and born in a massive breeding facility. So none of this was random. Like
Right,
nothing was left to chance. I
right.
mean, all the minutest details of my conception, or even on subtle levels before conception, a lot of intention was put into this by the cult people.
Yeah.
Uh, so yes, absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, look how much they put into credit card companies and stocks and crypto and products that they're putting out on our shelves and advertising it. They're putting way more intention and psycho spiritual focus on creating these products that they thought you were
Yeah,
looking you as. And I just want to remind people we can get on the Alpha Draconians all day long, but they are possessed and they do have a hierarchical nature. And look at the way humans treat animals in nature as objects or trees. So it's not far-fetched to understand why this race of beings that think they're the gods of this universe or that they're better than us in general or more powerful, definitely taller and bigger in stature, especially the higher ranking ones, that they would just see us as the way that people see cows at a factory farm, which
Hmm.
I don't see them that way, but generally humans of today have this perception of other life forms as less than or not containing soul or being inanimate in some way. And so I'm not giving the Alpha Draconians a pass or the Illuminati a pass. I can't help with my Gemini sun in tropical
Hmm.
astrology to be able to see multiple sides of something at once. So
Yeah,
we're just giving a voice to that because we're never going to ascend this matrix by fighting the Alpha Draconian reptilians. I mean, we can expose some things, but we also have to leave our hearts open to, do you want to come with us? Like, it's actually like really cool over here in paradise and fifth dimension and collaboration. Like, look what we could do if we all work together, instead of look how much energy it takes for them to do all this. This is 13,000 years of energy and programming that they've been putting into this,
yes.
that some of them have to be going, I'm worn out by this. Oh my gosh. Like the amount of work we put in just to make the entire planet think that other humans are the one doing all of this. There's so many layers to it.
Hmm.
So, and
Hmm.
speaking of the layers, I do want to go back into mind control, and I want you to touch a little bit on monarch programming, MK Ultra, because people are hearing these terms. They mention it in Stranger Things, which is a very popular Netflix TV show. So when these things get put into Hollywood movies and TV shows, they stop being taken seriously by the public, and they also get it turns into something. MK, I had someone say to me one time, MK Ultra, that's from Stranger Things. And I was like, oh my God, no, it is not. It is a
Hmm.
real thing that is happening. And
Yeah.
Monarch programming, the wearing cheetah print, and all of these really strange things that they do to access our psyche as human beings. Hijack it is the word that I want to use. So
Yes.
go into that from your perspective, because we've all had programming done on us, but
Yeah.
yours
I'd
obviously
like to
firsthand.
slow down some if we may, because you're on several different subjects at once. Um,
Sure.
I want to come back to the element of how I got free, which sort of ties in with something you were saying about holding love for the Draco. That was the basic key to my freedom was unconditional love. Love that actively includes all beings, including the most evil ones, including the Satanists who are perpetrating these things, including the Draco who are ordering the humans around. Everyone, all beings, including Lucifer himself, every living being. That was the single key which has helped me get to freedom, not just in that moment when I was physically enslaved, but now, even now, my journey to freedom continues, and it continues through unconditional love. That's the single biggest key that's needed. Um, so yeah, I wanted to say that. Um, and that is really what stops all this karma. It's what stops this insanity. Unconditional love is what releases the energy. And it has many forms, that have other concepts. I mean, forgiveness is obviously a big one. It has many facets. It comes in many ways. But that's the basic key. So I was able to get free not just by working against my handlers, but for working for the good of all, including my handlers. And that was the path to authentic freedom. Um, yeah. So that just needed to be said.
Yeah, thank you for
Um,
saying that.
yeah.
That's the message we need to hear.
Yeah.
Yeah, that this isn't just, we're not just doomed. This isn't just happening. We don't need to create a 5D version of Earth and have it bifurcate and jump onto that new Earth and get away from all these reptilians and all this craziness. It's a beautiful process of creating a whole new experience around non-judgment and unconditional love as well, which is
Absolutely.
non-duality, which is fifth dimension. That's what people don't get is they feel like if they don't find and expose the darkness and hate it and refuse it, that we won't get away from it, which is also another trap in making more of it and finding your way into that. And so
Yeah.
I feel that unconditional love and forgiveness is really, it's hard for people to find that in their own healing process. And we're going to go into your healing process, but you had to have found that within you. Not that it's not part of your soul code or part of your starseed lineage to already feel that. And so it may be easier for you than just anyone. But that is the code. And people, we're really in a time when we're exposing this, and there's lots of the ritual cult topics happening where even if people don't know that it's alpha draconian reptilian control, they're pointing at the global elites. It's more finger pointing, more witch hunting, more finding a villain for us to gather around and refuse. And the unconditional love breaks all those barriers and
Yeah.
dissolves all of that.
It's also non-binary. We can still call out the evildoers at the same time. So it's not either or.
Yeah,
It's both. I mean, yes, do call them out. Like we do need to bring awareness to this. We do need to actually understand and perceive what's happening in order to correct it. We can't correct it without perceiving it.
totally.
And so it's really valid, I think, to call it out, keep calling it out, and also remember that we are all one.
That's
You know,
difficult for people. They have to go through their own
yeah.
journey around it, just like in our own healing process. Once, like when I work with certain medicines like Wachuma, and it has me see certain shadow aspects of myself, I will immediately start to want to get rid of that aspect or start to beat myself up for it because that is one of my programmings from childhood. And then the medicine will say, actually, I was wanting you to see how you beat yourself up. That's the shadow. And I'm like, oh my gosh, you know. So it's again multidimensional and very layered.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Uh, okay, a couple threads. First off, I just want to acknowledge what you were saying about MK Ultra. MK stands for the German words mind control, control with a K. So that comes from the German context, the Nazi context. A lot of the modern psychotronic warfare that we're experiencing was developed in the context of 1920s and 30s Germany. So some of the terminology has carried over into the present. There was a small moment of disclosure with the actually named MK Ultra program of the U.S., which was exposed in front of Congress and the Senate in the early 70s, which carried over the German name. A lot of German scientists have been working for the US government since the end of World War II and even before that. Anyway, so it's also become sort of a pop culture term, a catch-all term for any kind of trauma-based mind control.
Yeah.
Oh, it's the MK Ultra to him, one of
Yeah.
those colloquialisms like, oh, he was a Manchurian candidate, like the
Right.
movie.
Yeah.
It's also so now it's just sort of a generic pop culture reference. Yeah, but it does come from that Nazi context originally. Um, so yeah, just wanted to name that. Um, and I'm glad also that it's passing into the larger culture and that it's a reference point that people have. It's powerful to be able to use that name, even if the people don't really know what they're talking about. It's still powerful just for those words to be exposed and out in the public consciousness. That does a lot of good. It raises everyone's vibration, I think.
Yeah. Yeah.
Uh, yeah,
Bringing it to light.
yeah, bringing it to light.
It was supposed to be hidden and secret, and now it's not. And this is the age of disclosure. So,
Yes.
absolutely.
Yeah, I always feel better when people bring it up. Like, yeah, obviously it's not a nice subject, but I just feel like, like it's coming out, even
Exactly.
if
Yes.
even if it's not in a particularly educated way, most of the time it's like it's there. It's there. We have to deal with it. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Um, okay, and then to backtrack a little to how I got free, because that was still in process, I feel like. Um, at 14, I made a major suicide attempt. I was incarcerated at the time on a small island off the coast of Long Island, to the south, um, where they were holding some of the people who were showing resistance. And I slit my wrists open pretty badly. I was able to find I don't have to go into details, but I was able to do that. Wounded myself very badly. I was bleeding out quickly. And I thought that was it. But it wasn't. They rescued me. They healed me. And after that, it kind of flipped my script in some different ways. I was like, wait, like you're saving me? Like, what the hell? Like, so that really got it in my awareness that they valued my life, and that there was some sort of soul contract, where they were not actually able to kill me or have me kill myself. Like,
Mm.
and it's a very mysterious thing that I still don't fully understand, but I trust it now. It's like, oh, yes, like there is some part of my soul contract that apparently says that they can't just kill me on a whim, that there are some deeper rhythms that have to be honored. And there are even contracts, I mean, this gets really out there, but there are contracts between creator or God and the devil. There are these massive contracts that are so collective in nature. So I started to realize some of that when I was 14, which is a lot for any 14-year-old, I may say, regardless of whether you're a starseed or not. I mean, I was tripping out. I was like, what the hell is happening? Why did they save me? What is going on? My guides tried to explain, but I didn't have that much conscious contact with my guides at the time, my Antarean guides and other positive angelic guides. So they explained bits and pieces to me. And I understood enough that I was able to continue. They basically said, this is your path to freedom now. Like, you initiated your path to freedom by attempting to kill yourself. So it's like I didn't understand it at the time. I sort of understand it now, but but it did initiate a series of events where essentially I just kept get I they kept offering me bigger and bigger and bigger things. They were offering me so much power. I could have been one of the wealthiest, most powerful people on the entire planet. And I just kept saying no. I kept trusting my guidance and, my angels and my experience with the suicide attempt when I left my body, like you do when you're starting to die.
Yeah.
Um, and it gave me a lot of insight that was really helpful and gave me the power and the strength to refuse all of their offers after that. And after several years of this is 14 to 16 years old in this body. Um, it came to the point where they realized they were never going to own me in any sort of conscious fashion. And they decided to let me go. But obviously, they don't just put you out on the street, from a holding cell. It was a very long process, and they attempted to give me pretty extreme brain damage and wipe my memories before I was released.
Yeah.
So there was a period of 7 or 8 months when essentially all that was happening is that I was being chemically tortured. I was getting electroconvulsive therapy, and I was being reprogrammed to try to suppress the entire experience, all my memories. And that's all that happened for 7 or 8 months. And it was extremely traumatic, extremely intense. I'm still unpacking some of those memories,
Yeah.
today. Um, but at the end of that process, like I really honestly did not remember almost any of it. Like I wasn't just like faking to get past the handlers. Like I did not remember at the end of that process because
Wow.
there was so much physical torture. Um, so yeah, so when I was released at 16, like I had only a vague idea of where I was even coming from. Like I was not really oriented to the situation. It's like, oh, I don't know what's happening. Like I know my mother was very mentally ill. I know there was some kind of abuse, but I don't know what. It was very, very vague. Everything was vague. Um, Unfortunately for me, I had a family friend, my high school best friend. His family took me in, and they were able to help me really get on track to have a more normal life, even without understanding where I was coming from. I certainly wasn't able to tell them, but my friend and his family, his mother, they were pretty intuitive and they knew that it was serious, whatever it was. And they knew that I couldn't go back home. And that was all we needed to know in that moment, you
Yeah.
know? And from then on, I could kind of pursue my own path.
Yeah. So not lucky, but blessed that you had that portal to move through. And how
Yeah.
scorpionic is it, the death and
Yeah.
rebirth process of, you know, killing yourself to be reborn as bringing more light in, allowing the wound to let more light of the soul and mission to come through. And so, how did you heal through all of this? The stories between mind control and trauma-based mind control programming and satanic ritual abuse survivors, there are definitely themes and threads that are similar, but there's also such a wide variety of how they got out,
Hmm.
what happened to them, and how they healed from this. Like, and I hate saying things like this because I know that it's easy to say this from the outside looking in, but I would never know having met you. Kathy O'Brien, I would never know when watching her interviews and watching her do public speaking. It just, I can't fathom what you all have been through. But,
Hmm.
and I've experienced things like this in other lives, but it's not the same as holding it in this here now body and in these
Yeah.
memories.
Yeah.
How did you get to the point now where you are holding space for others? You're doing shamanic work, you're doing healing work for people, and
Yeah.
a poet, a musician, living in Mount Shasta, going and working with the spirit of the mountain at any time, releasing energy. You know,
Mm.
I I look to you as a successful case of not only getting out, but healing oneself. And I know you're still in that journey, but I want
Mhm.
you to take us where you are now and how you've gotten to such a beautiful place in your life of healing and being of service and actually
Yeah.
living your mission, which is what you came here to do.
Well, thank you. I had a very long process to get here. So I've been free for about 20 years now, actually over 20 years, because it was 2003 when I got out. So what is that? 22 years I've been free. So there have been many, many iterations of my life and myself and my work and a lot of different paths that I've taken. When I first got out at 16, turning 17, I went to college for a couple years and quickly realized that there was something horrendously wrong. I still didn't know what it was, but I was starting to become aware that I was hindered in ways that were well beyond my conscious understanding. I had no idea about ritual abuse. I'd never heard another person talk about trauma-based mind control. I had never seen a book on it. This was totally foreign to me. So I was really going blind, which is still sadly the situation for many survivors even today. If you don't seek this stuff out, it's very, very hard. You sort of need a minor miracle just to come across
Yeah.
it.
Yeah. Because it's
Yeah.
so wiped from you and it lives in the body, but they take it from the mind, which can release all power of knowing which direction to go or how to address it from that point forward.
Yeah. So I went to college for a couple of years. I got very confused. I knew I couldn't have any contact with my family, but I didn't exactly understand why. It was like a gut feeling, but I couldn't really articulate anything that they had actually done. But I knew I couldn't, there was no question of going back. Like that was solid in my mind. Um, so after a couple years of college, I dropped out. I started traveling. And that's where I really started to find myself was hitchhiking around the US and Canada, going to different spiritual teachers, exploring different forms of artistic expression. That's when I started learning meditation, and it all kind of happened at the same time. Um, I should say I was barely verbal when I got out. My voice had really been taken from me on many different levels. And part of how I learned to speak again was through poetry. So it was very directly impactful to my healing to discover poetry. And as I was traveling around, I started traveling around with a typewriter and writing poetry for people on the spot, poetry upon request, I call it.
Yeah.
So that started quite early. That was like 2006 or 7 still. Um, and that was kind of my way to restart my whole verbal matrix of being, and learn to communicate again, learn to talk to people and have some sense of my own mind. Even not just my memories, but really my whole mind was very, very foggy at the time. Um, so poetry and especially writing for others, having that immediacy of people right in front of me, um, helped me kind of rebirth some verbal consciousness in myself at a time when I was largely mute. I also studied in different meditation traditions. Um, I couldn't trust anyone or anything, go figure.
Yeah.
So I gravitated towards those spiritual gatherings which had less teaching or less things that you had to do and more just actual silence and contemplation. So the first big one for me were Quaker meetings, which are so lovely.
Yeah, I bet.
I still love the Quakers so much.
Yeah.
That was basically my introduction to meditation. They don't call it meditation, but what
Right.
they do, yeah, what they do, these are New England Quakers in Vermont and New Hampshire were the ones that I was exposed to. What they do is they have basically a totally silent service, and you're all sitting there in silence. And for some meetings, if anybody gets inspiration, you're welcome to stand up and speak to the group. Like, and it can be anything. It can be like something that you feel is from God, or it can be just whatever you're thinking about. You know, if you get that divine inspiration, you can stand up and speak, and then you sit back down. And that's the entire service. It's just everybody sitting in silence, and then somebody speaking if they feel like it. And that's like, there's no like sermon in the traditional sense. And that was so magical for me. It was just so healing and magical. And I realized that I was actually doing something in the silence. I couldn't identify what it was. Again, I had no exposure to meditation or Eastern religion or any of that stuff. So I was like, there's something going on here that I really like. It was, as far as I could think about it. Um, But over the years, I went to different groups and I was like, oh, this thing is called meditation. It's a thing that has a name and you can do it. So, so I started going to different groups. And again, I was still trying to find those groups with the least amount of talking and teaching. So that wound me up with the Zen Buddhists, who are, they're sort of classically known for their reticence with words. It's all in the meditation. Don't think, just like do the meditation. So that resonated with me. I was like, okay. So then I got really serious about that for a number of years. And I studied with different Zen teachers as I was still traveling and hitchhiking. Um, I found a lovely teacher in the Portland, Oregon area, a guy named Satyavayu. He's still around, still teaching. Um, and he ran a homeless monastery, so they don't have an actual space, but they hold retreats and they have a monastic lifestyle outside, like in the Portland City Park or at a house squat, like an abandoned house or in a donated space of some kind. And yeah, it was just a really cool, really pure practice, which helped me a lot, and got me really committed uh, to meditation. I also came across some of the Buddhist teachings, some of the original Pali Canon, as it's called. So that's a whole subject in and of itself. I wound up learning a lot about Buddhism in the process, and I was eventually ordained as a Zen priest. So
Wow.
yeah, so that also happened. Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
but I don't bring that up too much these days. But but yeah, that was really there is some magic in that lineage,
Yeah.
and I got a lot out of the Buddha's teaching, especially in terms of the verbal teaching, especially the older schools, the Theravada Buddhist schools. Um, I also studied with some students of Ajahn Chah, who was a Southeast Asian old school Buddhist teacher. Um, anyway, I don't need to go on all these asides, but
Well, you're
these,
giving us some framework for how you healed from something so incredibly tragic and horrific and transmuted that into like alchemy, being brought to the different teachings and ways, like starting from the beginning, starting from just going within and going to the place where they go within, which is Buddhism, Zen Buddhism, and the Quakers. So it
yeah,
gives, some people who may be listening who are spotting that someone's been a part of satanic ritual abuse or that something may have happened to them and that they don't even remember, or people listening who are just now remembering, or maybe people listening who find this who suddenly remember after watching this episode. You're giving them direct places to go
yeah,
that are safe.
yeah. The other things that were really helpful for me, aside from meditation, and spiritual groups, were artistic practices. I mentioned poetry was really important for finding my voice. Also, dance was really important for getting back in my body.
Yeah,
Yeah.
totally.
Um, because yeah, clearly I didn't have a very close relationship with my body at that
Yeah,
time. Like I was barely aware that I was in a body most of the time, which is exactly how they want you to be,
totally.
the bad guys. So yeah, I went through a couple movement modalities. Dance especially resonated with me. I went to five rhythms dance classes.
Love
Uh,
five
did
rhythms.
yeah, it's really
Love it.
fun. I
Hmm.
did a bunch of ecstatic dance. I still go to the ecstatic dance in Mount Shasta. Um, the most resonant form for me has been contact improvisation, because it was so the opposite of anything I'd had experienced. So contact improv is a very intimate dance form where you're making a lot of physical contact, as the name implies, and you're sharing a center of gravity with another person. So you're leaning into each other so that if one of you withdrew support, the other one would fall down.
Yeah, yeah,
Um, and it's been such a good way to learn about support, like literal support in an embodied way. And it really extends to other kinds of support as well, I find.
yeah.
Um, I had the good fortune to be in New York. I went back to New York for a while, and there were just some fantastic contact improv jams that I would go to, and dance like a couple times a week, these amazing jams, and slowly kind of getting back into my body in this really organic way, just through free play with other people. Experiencing touch as something safe and positive
Yes.
for the first time in my life. I mean, that was revolutionary. Um, I mean, my first like easily almost a year of contact dancing, I barely made any physical contact. But but just to be in the space, I'm like, oh, I could do that, and people like it's safe to actually try that, you know? It's
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
very healing. Um, so yeah, I started developing some relationship with physical touch and my physical body in general through dance. Um, yeah, that was really helpful. Um, and then slowly, you know, started to realize and get curious about what exactly was wrong and what I had been through. So this is still years and years and years. I have no idea. I don't know what
Wow.
ritual abuse is. Like, I couldn't even like. I was so brainwashed and brain damaged and in denial that like I don't think I would have even said I was a sexual abuse survivor. Like
Right.
basically nothing. Yeah.
Right.
And then that continued for a while. I went back to school in Colorado for a bit. Um, and I got into my first relationship at that time, like sexual, like regular sexual relationship. And
That'll do it.
yeah.
I'll bring it up.
You might have imagined I was completely terrified to date anybody, but
Yeah.
um, when I was in Colorado, I was finally in my first like consistent physical sexual relationship, and it was opening up so much darkness, and I was completely terrified, and I was getting graphic flashbacks
Yeah.
of all this stuff that I had no context for.
Yeah.
Um, and I was totally overwhelmed. I had the good fortune to um, come across somebody who at the school, another student who was a tantra teacher and had some experience with sexual assault, and I told her just a few words about what was going on. Like, I'm really confused. All this stuff is coming up, you know, in my sexual relationship. I'm totally terrified. And she recommended a group called the Wings Foundation, which is based in Denver, Colorado, and it's a childhood sexual abuse support group. So I started going to those, and I had never done any therapy at all.
Yeah.
Um, I had been to some therapists as a child, but they were cult people who were
Totally. Yeah, I
reprogramming
know
me.
what you mean.
Yeah. So no bueno.
Because
Um,
they put handlers and cult leaders into positions like doctors and therapists so that when you go in there and tell them your issues, they are specifically there to gaslight you and make you question yourself. I mean, it's so organized.
yeah.
Ugh.
Ugh. Well, that was my first real therapy experience with non-cult therapists.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um, and as I was in that group, I was in a men's group. We were all telling stories about childhood sexual assault. By then, I'd gotten enough memories to know that I was sexually assaulted. So I started to identify with that experience.
Yeah.
Um, and as I was in that group for most of a year, I started to realize that whatever had happened to me, there were additional levels and layers that were not present for the other men. I still didn't know what they were, but I was like, there's a lot more here. Like, I could feel these men really bearing their hearts and like telling the depths of their stories. And something in me was like, my depths are quite different from your depths. You know, I was getting some perspective on a conscious level.
Yeah.
And that sort of led to me going when I returned to New York after some time in Colorado, going to a lovely therapy place called the Crime Victims Treatment Center. So we're getting warmer. It's like I
Right.
have identified myself to be a crime victim consistently enough to actually go to this place and try to seek service.
Yeah.
And that place was off the chain. They just like really knew what they were doing with very traumatized people. They assigned me to a younger female therapist whose specialty was working with teenagers who were just getting out of really abusive home backgrounds. And by that time, I was in my 20s, but still, it was the perfect choice for me because in my mind, I was a pure child or adolescent.
Totally.
And she was so patient with me and made it clear that we didn't have to go into any trauma experience, just spent a lot of time building trust with me. And that was the first time, honestly, that I ever trusted another human being,
Yeah. Yeah.
um, which is where therapy can be so magical.
Yeah.
Um, Yeah. So after like most of a year again with this therapist at the Crime Victims Treatment Center, I started to actually trust her. And it was a totally new sensation in my body. It's like, oh, this person's not going to betray me. Like, what the hell is that? What's going on? It was
Yeah.
very confusing. Um, but yeah, she was really patient with me. I worked with her for 2.5 years. And they also brought in other therapists. They had a woman doing creative visualization with me. I did some groups like getting educated about how trauma works. They even had a chakra work group, which is so lovely. Um, they're progressive enough to
Wow.
include some kind of
Yeah.
woo elements in their program. And yeah, I just really thrived in that environment. Um, and started to connect more dots and more dots. And by that point, I was identified as having been trafficked. I knew I had been sold and trafficked. I didn't even talk about that part, but um, I was also commercially sexually trafficked, as well as used as a breeder. So that was coming back. And even then, I just still, like, ritual abuse was not even on my mind. Um,
Well,
so
because it really is the farthest fetch
yeah,
could get to. And like that would take a lot of capacity on your psyche's part to even understand like I've that was me. I went through something like that. And if you don't even have any context for it because it's been wiped, or they may not even call it that in the cult. You know what
yeah,
I mean?
no,
This
they
is what we're calling it from outside.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's true. They don't use any of this language. Not really.
Because they probably
They
don't
have
see
their,
it that way.
yeah. Yeah, they have their own lingo. Um, well, that's when I started so I basically graduated from this intensive trauma therapy program, and still I was like, there's more, but I don't know what the more is. But so then I was really spinning my wheels. Um, I saw another therapist after that, but he wasn't really helping me get anywhere. Um, and that's when I started going to Survivors of
I'm
Incest
still here,
Anonymous.
by the way.
Oh, okay.
My camera's hot.
Yeah. Hot, hot. That's when I started going to Survivors of Incest Anonymous meetings. That's a 12-step group. But it's not a 12-step group based around an addiction like other ones that people are more familiar with, like alcohol or drugs or sex addiction, different ones. Survivors of Incest Anonymous is just that, people who have survived incest gathering to work on that. And yeah, there was a weekly meeting in Prospect Park in Brooklyn that I used to go to. And that's when I started meeting other ritual abuse survivors who actually knew they were ritual abuse survivors. It was in those meetings.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that was probably already, I mean, we're getting into the recent past. This is like 2016 or so, 15,
Yeah.
16, somewhere around there. And it was in those SIA meetings that I started to meet other survivors and just listening to them, like, oh, you were trafficked. And then I would listen to them and they're like, oh, you came from a satanic cult. Oh, you had government abuse. Like, oh, putting some pieces together. That's where I first met Annika Lucas, by the way.
Oh,
The woman with whom I had my most popular podcast so far.
yeah.
She and I were in those SIA meetings together. And yeah, it was just a cauldron for a lot of different stuff. Um, I started identifying the people in those groups. So these are big meetings, pretty common to have 30 or 40 people in a gigantic circle of folding chairs. I started to identify the people in those circles who had more going on, who had been trafficked, who were being tracked by the government, gang stalked,
Yeah.
like tracked, attacked, and all this stuff, all the ritual abuse, targeting, mind control stuff. And I started hanging out with them, and I was like, "You guys, I've gone through something like this. This is what I went through."
Yeah.
Um, and yeah, that's when I really started getting big chunks of memory back. It was like that external validation was really powerful for me. Um,
Yeah, of course. I mean, you have
ah,
to have language. You have to have, I mean, not trusting others. I mean, I highly doubt you trusted yourself since they specifically
no.
set a program in motion that you didn't trust yourself. You know,
Yeah.
live, don't live.
Mm.
You're horrible. You're amazing. I mean, just the whole gambit was run on you. So,
I appreciate you naming that. Yeah. Yeah, that's again the foundation of mind control is a series of false dialectics that are very deeply implanted into a person to the point where you can't trust any thought whatsoever. Yeah. You
yeah.
can't trust praise, you can't trust blame. Yeah, exactly. It's just like a void.
Yeah, because you're just
Um,
literally split.
yeah.
Everything is in opposition, and you're
Yeah.
sitting there in the middle in this tug of war constantly, which
Mm,
is what causes a free state, which is then dissociation, and then you have someone who's easily possessed or manipulated to do something that isn't them.
mm.
And so getting around other people that had been through that, and it gave you a model, an inspiration, someone to say, this is what it can look like in healing or what the naming can be. And that truly is the breaking point of it all.
Yeah. Yeah, that's when the dam that had been crumbling truly broke. Um, and I started getting a little bit educated about actual ritual abuse and mind control. And on the recommendation of some of these survivors, I believe also looking into video disclosures that people had made, finding a lot of different stuff that I'd never been exposed to. And synchronistically, this was also the time that I started to realize I was a starseed in a conscious sense. Of course, this all goes together. Um,
Absolutely.
um, yeah, I had a new meditation teacher at that time that I was studying with, who was much more oriented towards the starseed name and narrative and way of approaching meditation. Um, and her meditations were really powerful for me. A woman named Allison Moore.
Uh-huh.
And she was also doing a lot of energy work. She was doing in several different modalities, mainly matrix energetics, which I may have mentioned. I think we've talked about that a little bit, but um, so she taught me a few parts of the matrix system, um, and I started realizing that I was an energy worker also. I'd always been doing intuitive healings, and that had been going on basically the whole time. I mean, I became conscious that my poetry sessions were also healings. Probably somewhere a couple years before that, maybe 2014.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, 2016-ish was when this really the dam started breaking, learning about ritual abuse, hearing other survivors, seeing other people with altars like live in action and realizing that I had altars. And I was completely oblivious of this, but I had another survivor in those groups. Her name was Sunny, and she was like, "You have altars," and I was like, "What? No way!" Um, yeah, so that started unraveling, and then I really kind of got into it, basically without any real formal support in this community context, in this kind of 12-step context, and community context. And joining different groups. Annika had a chat group that I joined. Different survivors were doing things basically on their own initiative. And then I gathered some of the people together, some of the ritual abuse survivors from the larger SIA meetings, and started a smaller meeting, which I called RASA, Ritual Abuse Survivors Anonymous.
Uh-huh.
Um, so we met in that way with a smaller group. It was only 4 or 5 people most of the meetings, but I was just so moved. I was like, I have to do something. I have to hold a space for this. So we had those meetings for a while. And then I joined another peer group, and we called ourselves SASSY, Survivors Aiding Survivors of Extreme Abuse.
Wow.
And that was like a group healing, a weekly meeting for group healing where it was all ritual abuse survivors. Um, so I was doing a lot of these community type things. Um, and then getting more deep into my own meditations, getting more in contact with my Antarean guides. And this is when I started really coming out also as a healer. It was all of a piece.
Yeah.
Um, so I had my first like energy work and coaching clients around this time. I started leading my own meditation groups around this time. Um, so yeah, by 2017 or so, I think 2017 was a massive positive timeline shift for everyone, which I think we've touched on before.
Yeah.
But that's when I came out and started offering my energy work publicly, started talking about ritual abuse publicly. I think I did my first interview with James Rink's Super Soldier Talk around that time. It was 2017 or maybe 2018. Um, yeah, and that's the beginning of my modern era.
Yeah.
Um, and since then, I've been getting more and more confident, and more and more actually able to help other survivors. Um, and yeah, and now I'm getting to a point where it's like, oh, that's the main thing that I'm focused on, you know. Um,
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you're here for many reasons, but we do need to start with that because if we look at the whole ascension process that we're in, all of that, the false matrix that we're in, Saturn and the frequencies being emitted and the moon and everything, all of that has to do with the global elite and the reptilians and then the programming that they're creating, the mind control, which is helping them create more of this false matrix because it's us creating it,
mm,
because of our mind controlled selves creating more of this realm that they operate so well within. So if we think about the density, yeah, it's great to go on the top of Mount Shasta and commune with your star family. That's great. But also, we do need to go down and retrieve people. We need to
mm,
retrieve their soul parts, but we need to retrieve them and help them retrieve who they really are. And we need to go to the areas of the most density. That's going to accelerate this process the quickest. And also you went through it. It's part of your story and the
yeah.
story that you tell. So you of all people have been assigned this role.
Hmm.
And on a soul level, you assigned it to yourself, but it is also on a collective level. We need those of you who not only remembered, but say, I'm a starseed and I'm a healer, and I'm going to use that specifically for these people because it takes a very specific code and nuance. And if I were a survivor, I would really need to go to someone who was a survivor who has now stepped into their power and into their mission in this way so that I didn't just realize that I could heal from this, but actually I could heal and then ascend and create an incredible life. Like it doesn't have to be what they told me it was going to be. Life has no meaning. Everything is suffering. Life is going to be discomfort for you. So you really embody and hold the code of the opposite of that. So, how can people, what do you offer people today in your healing work? You mentioned it earlier, but I want people to know of all types of people, not just people who've been in satanic ritual abuse situations or trauma-based mind control, but people seeking healing or who are called to work with you. What do you offer?
Well, the answer that covers everything is remembrance of who we are and who you are and how this is really supposed to be, which is just universal for every honest healer, for every shamanic practitioner. So obviously that covers anyone in any situation because we can all be more realized in coming into that which we actually are. That's the foundational thing and moving into unconditional love. So I share that foundation with every other honest healer on the planet.
Yeah.
Um, and then more specifically, um, I hold space for people to go into these extremely complex memories, and retrieve parts of themselves, integrate alters. I love getting to know different alters of other people, and experiencing their integration over some time. It's a slow process, but over some weeks, over some months and years, like it really does work. and creating safety and trust and really just doing what my first therapist did for me. It's like making a space where people often for the first time can trust another human being. So that
Yeah.
doing that thing. Um, and then on a consciousness level, helping people tune into all the starseed vibrations and get embodied with whatever their iteration of galactic consciousness is. Um, so that's a big one too, and quite independent of any of the ritual abuse healing stuff. That's part of who we actually are that
Yeah.
I like to help people bring in.
Sorry, there is a insectoid looking thing that just happened in my vision and it just
Mhm.
totally cut off my train of thought.
Yeah. Well,
Um,
I'm a mantid being, among other
oh my God,
things.
that's what it was. And I could
Yeah.
see I don't want to say legs or, uh,
Yeah, a little
yes,
forearms, whatever those are.
right
Yeah.
in front of my vision right now.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah.
With like little, like hairs it almost looks like thorns on a rose stem.
Hmm.
And so, sorry, almost like a beetle or a roach, like the way their legs have these little,
Yes.
appendages coming. I'm so sorry. Was not expecting that, and I'm
Oh,
so
no offense
sorry.
taken. Yeah. So yes, we are also a mantis being, and we take no offense at this. This is how we are. Yeah.
Yes, and not scary, just was just very sudden and very powerful too. I'm also hearing eighth something. Like think I'm dealing with something of an eighth dimensional connection or
Mhm.
something of that nature.
Mhm. Yeah,
And
yeah.
so it is wiping my train of thought out. So
Yeah.
basically, we're going to bring it back here. Thank you so much for being here, all of you. Um, but
Well, this is welcome. We are eighth dimensional beings. I mean, you
we
are
are, we
perceiving.
exist in all of it. But what is interacting with me right now really exists in those dimensional fields much more than it exists in this physical realm.
Hmm.
And so it is holding a voltage power that is that is much more distracting to my energy, or much more like how consciousness of a higher nature can, through coherence, absorb not lower or less conscious, but consciousness that vibrates slower will cohere or adhere to
Mhm.
that. It
Yeah.
grabbed me for a moment, so
Oh,
excuse
sure.
me.
No, my mantis self is a big reason that I'm coherent at this time.
Yeah.
With all due credit to my earth healing modalities, my eighth dimensional mantis self is like very, very core to my healing and is always helping me recenter and gather all my parts and aspects. Yeah.
Well, and thank you. It is quite large, and colorful too. Lots of different, it is very vibrant energy. So it just caught my attention, I can tell you that.
Yeah.
So I
Feels
appreciate you
seen.
being here, all parts of you,
Mhm.
Max, Alondra, all of what that is and all of what you are in a multidimensional nature. So um, I'm just really appreciating you and the work that you do. And it is an honor to have you on here because um, I have not been through this in this way in this lifetime,
Mm.
but I feel, when we're talking about healing modalities and shamanism and astrology and all these different fun things in the spiritual realm, we need to dive deeper and we need to go to where the dense places are and do the real shamanic work and the real
Mhm.
galactic shamanic work. And you're really holding that and have chosen that. And I just want you to know I see you for that. And I hope, and I'm setting the intention now before we close this, that anyone who is meant to find this episode or find you will come and find you, and that anyone who is ready to remember on a body level, who is ready to be tipped over the edge where these memories come back online, or they're ready to seek help, they're ready to do something about this. Even people who may see this episode who are still involved with certain cults and may not know it or do know it, and you're
Mm.
ready to get out, there is a safe place for you. And Alondra, where can people find you?
Oh gosh. Yeah, thank you for naming all that. Um, well, first of all, you can find me in your inner awareness in meditation. I'm always available etherically. I love to help people that way.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, yeah, but in terms of 3D stuff, my main healing website is called Antarean Journeys These are Antarian beings that I am,
Yeah.
one aspect anyway. So Antarean journeys, AntarianJourneys.com is the main place. Um, I'm also on YouTube. I have a lot of my recordings of my guided meditations on YouTube, and that is just Alandra Markman. So all one word, no at sign, youtube.com/ Alandra Markman, all one word. Yeah, and my meditations are there. Um, People can reach me through the website or through YouTube. My email is alandra@riseup.net. Um, yeah,
I'll
those
put
are the
all
main.
that in the show notes below.
Yeah, and I have a couple other things for my side gigs, as we all do these days. I know you have like three things
I
at the
do.
same time. And I'm like that too. So there's also a website for the typewriter poetry, and some other mu separate sites for music and stuff like that. But yeah.
Well, beautiful. I know that we can, if people are ready to dive into the universe of Alandra Markman, they can
Hmm.
start with AntarianJourneys.com and
Yeah.
reach out to you and then go to your YouTube channel and connect with you. You were very open to connecting with me. I've had the fortunate chance of having an in-person shamanic healing, I'm going to call it that, if that's okay,
Mhm.
healing session with you, and it was a beautiful experience. So I highly encourage anyone who feels called, especially those of you who are working through mind control and trauma-based mind control and being a survivor of extreme abuse in this way, to reach out to Alondra because their therapy's great and we want you to seek all avenues. But there's nothing like someone who understands what you've been through, who also holds a very high eighth dimensional loving frequency that can come through and sort of speed up and accelerate the healing process. Because Alondra, I know you're here to keep people from going through what you went through, which is just years of, and it was meant to be this way, but just years of following breadcrumbs where there are those of us who forge the path so that other people can just easily ride their bike through it. And
Yeah.
so I appreciate you for being a pioneer. I appreciate you for incarnating all parts of you, for the work, and for being such a brave soul to come into such a density here and to experience such pain and to
Uh-huh.
transmute it into love and music and poetry and dance and guidance and starseed openings for other people. I see
Mm.
you. Thank you all so much for joining us for this conversation. I'm sure we'll have Alondra on again. And if anyone needs to connect with me or wants to work with me, you can go to chrisking.com, ascended-astrology.com, and medicinealchemist.com. Those will be in the show notes below. I thank
Mm.
you all so much for witnessing us, and we're all in this together, ascending the matrix, and we will see you all next time.
Ah, thank you.